On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
The chair of the board of directors at Fierté Montréal has resigned just as the city's festival comes into full swing. This comes after Fierté Montréal found itself in turmoil over its stance on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The organization of
Montreal Pride has been making headlines around the world this past week after pro-Israel Jews who are members of Ga'ava, Montreal's oldest Jewish LGBTQ organization, and CIJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, suddenly found themselves being expelled from the city's largest Pride events and its high-profile parade, which is set to go on Sunday afternoon, August the 10th. Pride Montreal asked the two pro-Israel Jewish groups, and by the way also an Iranian group, to stay home. They blamed the Jewish leaders for making Pride Week unsafe by using what they described as, quote, hateful discourse, unquote, when describing some pro-Palestinian protesters as supporters of terror or supporters of Hamas. You can read what the words were that were allegedly said in the CJN's Montreal correspondent Joel Chiaushu's stories, which we link to in our show notes. Now, the issue all came to a head on July 30th, when, after excluding the Jewish groups, the Pride organization announced its public political stance on the Israel-Hamas war, saying they oppose the ongoing genocide in Gaza and support the Palestinian people and amplify the voices of queer communities and oppressed peoples, especially Palestinians, and the queer community in Palestine. International outrage happened over the exclusion of the Jewish groups. It grew and led to a bunch of resignations from the Montreal Pride Board of Directors. So by Tuesday of this week, Pride agreed to go back on its decision, extended an olive branch, and welcomed Ga'ava and CIJA back with an apology to the Jewish community. Now, as all this was playing out, some members of Canada's queer Jewish community watched the controversy unfold and were left wondering whether they should show up and participate in the Pride event in Montreal at all and do the 2-kilometer march through the city, knowing they weren't wanted. There's also concern they'll have to be flanked by heavy security once again this year, and even so may encounter anti-Israel and possibly even anti-Semitic protests along the route. But Ga'ava and CIJA are calling for a big turnout after what some activists say is a big victory for the Jewish LGBTQ community. So not showing up after all the struggle would be a mistake.
That sort of underscores the travesty of what happened with Ga'ava and CIJA. It's this idea that we are not even worth being included anymore. And in fact, not only are we a shame to the community, but we're a stain on their pride. And that type of hatred is truly psychologically damaging.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Friday, August the 8th, 2025. Welcome to North Star, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Claire Frankel is a board member of Montreal's J-Queer organization. She's a recent graduate of McGill University, where after October 7th, she found herself excluded from university LGBTQ events because of her support for Israel. She now works in the Montreal office of Liberal MP Anthony Housefather. In the past, she has participated in Montreal's Pride March. She plans to go this weekend, too. Harvey Brownstone was appointed 30 years ago to the Ontario Court of Justice. He was Canada's first openly gay judge, during which time he performed countless same-sex marriages. He was once president of the Chutzpah organization, a group for Toronto's Jewish queer folks who pushed for more recognition and acceptance within the Jewish community. He's now retired from the law, but he has a new career as an author and host of a popular celebrity interview talk show on YouTube. To discuss how they've both been impacted by watching the events in Montreal and the conflict over Israel and Palestine impacting Pride events in other cities, both Brownstone and Frankel join me now. Both of you, welcome to the CJN's North Star.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
So just off the top, Claire, since you've been intimately involved in watching this, was this outcome a good thing? Are you pleased that the Jewish groups are back in?
I think that's a really good question because that's something that, has been staunchly debated within the community in terms of, do we still show up despite everything? But I think that it's amazing that Ga'ava has decided to really make this as big as possible and to mobilize as many people and show that no amount of hatred will ever stop us from being a part of the queer community because we fought for it. I feel very proud that we're still showing up despite all of the hostility. But I understand there are lots of people in the community who feel differently, where they want to boycott Pride completely. But I really think that this was the right decision to go ahead and to show that we're not only just going to show up, we're showing up in big numbers.
Harvey, you've been watching, I'm sure, what's been happening from your vantage point in Toronto. Would you like to say how you feel about whether this was a good outcome for the queer community or for Jews in general?
Oh, it's absolutely a good outcome. There's no question that the Fierté committee did the right thing. It's shameful that it had to take so much effort on behalf of Claire and all of her compatriots to sensitize the gay community of all communities that this was the right solution. But Claire is 100% right. We have to show up. We can never be silenced. Those who don't want to go, though, they shouldn't be forced. But we need to show the world that we are not in the wrong. We have nothing to be ashamed of. We are proud of who we are and what we believe in.
Exactly.
But what damage does this do? Like you mentioned that it's been a debate. What has been sort of the damage that's left?
I mean, it's hard to really put it into words just how hurtful this has been for our community. Every year at the Pride Parade, when I've walked with Ga'ava, there have been tensions. The first year that I walked with them was in 2022. And at that point, we could feel hostility.
Because our listeners will remember in May 2021, there was the 11-day war between Israel and Hamas, and it was already starting in Montreal again to have the pink washing and the accusations of genocide and things like that against Israel. Yeah.
Yeah. And so at that point, it really just looked like, it appeared to me that it was more that we were the shame of the queer community, that, when we would walk by a group of people, people would be cheering for the groups in front of us, but they would just go quiet when we would walk by. But that was 2022. 2023, things escalated. When we walked in the parade last year, we had a lot of security. CIJA and Ga'ava were able to secure that, which is incredible. And unfortunately, we needed it. We were being harassed. We were being yelled at. There were moments in the parade where we stopped for very long periods of time because there was a demonstration called the Die-In, where people pretend to die, basically to show how they feel about the war. I don't know why that has to be with pretending to be dead, because that's rather traumatizing for people in the community who have lost loved ones on both sides of this conflict.
Do you want to share your own connection to October 7th?
Yeah, so I grew up in Vancouver, and on October 7th, we lost a really important member of our community. We didn't go to high school together, but every time I would see him, Ben Mizrahi, he would always make me feel like I was a part of whatever we were doing. He was one of those people that would always look around and include people. And I think that sort of underscores the travesty of what happened with Ga'ava and diarité. And especially for the queer community, Harvey, as you were mentioning earlier, we become family a lot of the times. It's chosen family. And to have those bonds break over your own identity is beyond devastating. We're being asked to fracture our Judaism, and it's just not possible for me. So where does that leave the rest of us?
Well, Harvey, Claire mentioned her parade, that there was hostility. They had to have security. In Toronto, the parade was halted and canceled in the middle of it because of a situation that similar to that. I'm not sure if you were there. I should have asked you before. Do you go to pride parades at all, or in Toronto or elsewhere?
I don't go anymore because I don't think Pride has maintained the purpose of what it was all about. I was part of the community back in the 70s when we were a political organization fighting for our rights. I think Pride has become very commercialized, and it's much more of a tourist event for straight people to come and watch all the queers, as opposed to an event that really celebrates who we are and what we've achieved and what we have yet to accomplish. So no, I don't go anymore, but I am aware of what you're talking about. And I think that Claire has been incredibly articulate and poignant in the way she describes the impact on Jewish gay people to be rejected by our own community when we are already marginalized. We are already feel disenfranchised in many ways. And yet the fact that Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has any respect for same-sex rights, for gay rights, the fact that gay people could possibly be anti-Israel is absolutely beyond mind-boggling. And it's very important for gay people, whether they're Jewish or not, to say, what? Are you out of your minds?
It's so crazy that you say that, Harvey, because recent statistics have shown that within the top 3 most hate crimed groups in Canada include the Jewish community and the queer community. We don't really have any stats on how people are doing at that intersection, but knowing the data out there, I believe that it's safe to assume that queer Jews are being exceptionally targeted right now. And the fact that we don't necessarily feel completely safe within our own Jewish community as well as the queer community sort of puts us in this,
You're a double target.
yeah.
What does it look like for either of you to say that you're not safe feeling in the Jewish community?
Well, that's a real lightning bolt of a question, because the fact that there are so many Jewish people who are so vocally anti-Israel makes it extremely difficult for the rest of us, because other people then use that against us and say, look, your fellow Jews don't even agree with what's happening in Gaza. And so Claire is right. We are double targeted. And what it does to gay people that's different to other people is that we end up having to go back in the closet as Jews. And we will not be closeted again. My generation worked way too hard for Claire's generation to never have to do that. And we're not going to do it.
Why did the Jewish mainstream groups, and I'm calling Ga'ava as a mainstream, but also CIJA in Quebec, use such harsh words and basically call these radical elements of the Pride movement, that it wasn't the whole Fierté that wanted the Jews not to participate, but only radical? They use those words. Or is that correct? Is that accurate, that it was just a small fringe that wanted you guys out, or what?
I can't really speak exactly to that wording, but at least in my own interpretation of that, especially, it's a nuanced position. And I think that it's important because it wasn't generalizing about everyone within the Fierté Montreal community. And what it actually did was show that we're ready to embrace the rest of the community as long as they're ready to embrace us. And there is a small minority that is trying to terrorize us out of participating within our own celebrations for our own community. It is a very small fringe group, but they are loud and they have a lot of influence, and they use scare tactics as a way to bully different organizations and everything into falling for anti-Semitic scapegoating because it's just easier.
Just so we are clear, every single organization, whether it's Toronto's, Moncton's, Fredericton's, Victoria's, all of their wording on these groups says we are not for anti-Semitism. We oppose anti-Semitism, right? So I'm wondering how you navigate their stated, mission statement versus what then ends up. They say, well, we're not anti-Israel, we're not Semitic, we're just anti-Israel. Harvey, do you want to go first with that?
Well, I mean, that is a very common justification for the comments that people make that, I'm not anti-Jewish. I have nothing against Jewish people, but I don't agree with what Israel is doing. That's what many Jews are
Lots of
saying,
Jews are saying that too, right?
for heaven's sakes, and everybody has the line that they draw as to what criticisms of Israel become anti-Semitism. There are people who will say that anytime you criticize Israel, you're being anti-Semitic. There are people who disagree with that. We cannot ignore that that's a reality of what's going on in the world. There are some very strong supporters of Israel who don't like Netanyahu and don't agree with the strategies right now. But what Claire is talking about is bigger than that. It has to do with our presence. The fact that we are part of the gay community, we are part of the LGBTQ queer community. And whether they agree with our stance on whether it be the Ukrainian war or whether it be Donald Trump or whether it be any other issues, we should never be excluded, because let's remember that being queer is just a sexual orientation. That's all it is. We have nothing more in common with each other than straight people do. It's just a part. It's like having brown hair or blue eyes or having or being right-handed. That's all it is. So we try to make a community out of ourselves, but the truth is that what bound us as a community was the fact that we were a despised minority. That's what made us get together. Otherwise, you would be seeing straight pride, and you don't, because they don't need it. So the fact that we have very different views about many things. There are people that are vegan that don't want meat eaters marching in the parade. But the community had reached a point many years ago where they decided we are not going to get into any of that because we're only celebrating our sexual orientation and our sexual identities. We don't get into all the rest of it because we're too different. But when it came to Jews and when it came to Israel, it was okay to do it. And that's the problem.
Yeah, it's this idea that inclusion is conditional, and it's conditional on being a certain type of Jew.
It's supreme bigotry and it's supreme prejudice and discrimination. And it is part of an overall agenda to disenfranchise any Jew who supports Israel, whether you're gay or not.
It's not just the Jews, it's also people who are in close proximity.
So allies.
I mean, it's all of it. It's social, cultural, political. I mean, it's everywhere. This is how anti-Semitism works, and this is why it's institutional, why it's systemic and systematic.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
What I'm interested in is that in the last 3 years, you mentioned since 2022, Claire, the Jewish mainstream organization, federations, the synagogues, CIJA, has now sort of entered the battle in some of these communities, including Montreal, but also I remember they tried to shut down Fredericton's march a couple of years ago, who were platforming the marshals were going to be Palestinian marshals from Gaza. How does that sit with you, where the organizations where you struggled to gain acceptance, now there's There's the queer caucuses. There's all kinds of, they march in all the parades proudly for years, CIJA and federations now are trying to shut this down or at least make it safer for you. But also it's they're protests. They're kind of getting in the way. Do you know what I mean? And like, how does that work? That the people that are supposed to represent you are now trying to like sort of protect you from the groups that you're still a member. I don't know how to explain it.
It's really complicated.
Well, I think that it's something we've always had to live with. It's not new. And we have to accept the fact that there are people who disagree with us about all kinds of things. But when it comes to the gay community, the queer community, I should say, the diversity within that community is something that used to be celebrated and embraced. And now it's not.
Again, it's very layered. It's very complex. Welcome to the Jewish queer experience. I'm really appreciative of the fact that CIJA and all these different big groups are stepping in, that there are members of the government too that are showing up for us. Of course, it's complicated because a lot of the times when queer Jewish groups have gone to these types of organizations for funding, etc., it's been a battle to receive funding. 1 year for J Queer, for instance, we asked for, I think it was $500 for the budget for the entire year from Federation, and we were given $300 for the entire year. And we were the only group providing services for Jewish, Zionist, queer students. And it's really difficult. I mean, when we say queer is political, it's not just a statement, it's a layered fact. So when we're dealing with these dynamics of exclusion within the queer community, but then also being like, okay, we have our Jewish community, we can take a deep breath, they've got us, but not fully, or it's conditional. So it's not two sides of the same coin. It isn't. I'm going to make that very clear because we're dealing with glorifying terrorism versus not necessarily providing the best support to queer Jewish youth. But I actually think that investing in queer Jewish youth is the best thing the Jewish community could do, especially now. I think that obviously it looks like these organizations have really now understood the extent of hatred that we have been receiving, but we've been screaming in the dark for a long time. You know, obviously they say 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Well, one thing that I find very difficult is this idea that you cannot criticize the Israeli government without being anti-Semitic. You know, they're claiming to speak for the entire Jewish queer community. And while we appreciate all of the advocacy and everything, there's just no way to be able to represent this amount of diversity, you know? And in order to be able to get into those high-level conversations and really be able to do the high-level important work here, you need organizations like that to help bring youth up. Because we're also the ones who are on the ground and experiencing things firsthand. And this mutated form of anti-Semitism that maybe people don't recognize, but it's very real. There's nothing pro-Palestinian about cheering for Hamas, about saying that all Zionists are racist, all Zionists are terrorists, that all Zionists need to go back to Poland, all of that.
And we're going to bring in Harvey about this.
We queer Jews are members of 2 communities, and those 2 communities don't see eye to eye in many respects. I just would add that we're also going through this in the general community. It's not, the queer community is expressing views that we also have to deal with and contend with in the non-queer community. And we're being isolated and identified in a way that no other minority within the queer community is. So I can't imagine the loneliness and despair that people in Claire's position who are young and who are seeking to identify with like-minded people are going through. It's really heartbreaking.
I'm wondering if you think, Harvey, that Jews who just went through this or in other cities that had this fight should participate in these parades after not being wanted on the voyage.
Oh no, I absolutely think they should go. This is a victory. This is a victory that we should be very proud of. We lose by not going, and the anti-Semites win if they feel that they scared us away. So we need to be. That's what pride is. That's the whole purpose of fierté in Quebec, or pride in English Canada. Pride means you go there bold-facedly in everyone's face, saying, "We're here. We're queer. We're Jewish. We support Israel, and we're not going away."
But Claire said that they have to go with big security entourages in order to do this. So how does that fit with what Harvey just said? Go big, but go with like a bulletproof vest. You still like that?
Yeah. It's very much, sort of the Jewish experience in the broader world in general right now of like, be a proud Jew, but also we're dealing with real threats here. So you have to be careful. I personally feel much safer with all of the security and everything, but I know that that's not the experience for everyone and that it can actually do the opposite effect for some. Again, we are not a monolith. There's always a risk, but it makes me extra proud that despite all of that and despite the type of threats that our community has received, that there's so many people who are willing to show up and to show that we're not going to be pushed out of a parade that's supposed to be about inclusion.
So I'm wondering, have you had any thoughts about this going forward? What would you like to see coming out of the Fierté scandal that happened in Montreal?
Well, I would like the world to see that we're not going to be silenced, that we're proud of our support for Israel, and that we are setting example for Jews everywhere who face this kind of exclusion, whether it be at work, where people in the lunchroom say things that make you feel very uncomfortable, or in social situations. God knows we've all been to dinner parties where the conversations turn to a topic that makes it clear that we are the enemy in the room. We need to develop coping mechanisms and strategies, whether you're queer or not, for how to be proud of the position we take, which is exactly the position that Claire has said, that the biggest enemy of the Palestinian people is Hamas, not Israel. That's Jewish pride.
I'm so glad that you met. I'm sure, Claire, that this will be a conversation that will stay with you over the weekend as you're marching in the parade.
It absolutely will. And this definitely gives me a lot of courage. It helps motivate me. We like to say that, Israel is the only place in the Middle East where gay people can live safely. True. Fact. At the same time, if you're not properly investing in Jewish queer youth or just the Jewish queer community in general, I find that the use of the experience of Palestinian gay people to be frustrating. I think the better approach with that, especially amongst youth, is actually showing that you care about the queer community, not just saying.
So financially support here at home instead of using that as a talking point.
Exactly. And so I think that what you're doing right now, just even platforming this conversation, is extremely, extremely important. And we just really all need to be much kinder to each other, much more tolerant, more patient, and hopefully we will get through this Pride Month with real pride and joy.
Amen.
Amen.
That's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of North Star, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Now, last year, I'm told there were 3 security services on hand to ensure the Jewish Pride Parade marchers were safe. The Jewish Federation's Community Security Network will provide personnel and expertise again this year, on top of whatever Pride and the Montreal Police deploy. North Star was produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman and Andrea Varsany. Michael Freeman is our executive producer, and Brett Higgins composed the theme music. Let's hear from you on this story. We're at info@thecijn.ca. And thanks for listening.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.